Number 10. Moira Murray. The case of Moira Murray is nothing short of tragic. She was only 21 years old after she mysteriously vanished off the face of the earth. It happened in 2004 in New Hampshire. On the evening of February 9th, Moira crashed her car while driving along a country road. The last person to see her alive was a school bus driver who stopped and offered Moira a hand. Instead, Moira waved him off and said she'd be okay by herself. She was calling AAA, but being the kindly man that the bus driver was, he phoned the police anyway. He knew there was no cell service and that Moira was probably worried because she was alone. By the time the police arrived at the scene, Moira was gone. Her car was locked and turned around to face the opposite direction of where it had originally stopped. There was no trace of her, or of anybody else. Over 17 years later, and not a single clue has come to light regarding Moira's case. Nobody knows if somebody snatched Moira off the side of the road, if the bus driver himself kidnapped Moira, or if she simply wandered off through the snow or was eaten by a bear. According to the New Hampshire Attorney General's office, the case is still an open investigation, and they are still urging anyone with any information to come forward and contact the New Hampshire State Police. Some still hold out hope that Moira will return one day. Others are sure she's gone, buried, or otherwise lost to the world. Number 9. The sleepy sickness. There was once a sleeping sickness epidemic that transformed its victims into human statues, completely speechless and unable to move. To this day, scientists can't understand or explain what caused the mysterious sickness. It all began after World War I. The sleeping disease, also known as lethargic encephalitis, affected millions of people all over the world. There are various estimates, but it's agreed that roughly 1 million of those inflicted with the sickness died, and others spent the remaining years of their life stuck in a living coma. Believe what you will, but this is one of the biggest medical mysteries in history, and almost nobody even knows it happened. The illness spread across the world at roughly the same time that the Spanish flu was busy killing over 50 million people. This could be why the sleeping sickness went so unreported back in its day. After all, until the coronavirus pandemic, almost nobody even talked about the Spanish flu recently. The sleeping sickness began in 1915, with the first patients being soldiers displaying lethargy and extreme confusion in Paris. People of all ages were affected. The initial symptoms were similar to the flu, and by the time the encephalitis had seized hold of their minds, it was too late. The brains of the infected became so inflamed that they were turned into brainless zombies. The lucky ones were those who died. And to this day, scientists can't figure out what caused the sleeping sickness or how it was transmitted from person to person. Number 8. Walter Collins. It was March 10th, 1928, when Walter Collins disappeared from his neighborhood in Los Angeles. He was only 9 years old at the time. The local police searched for Walter for 5 months, even investigating a nearby lake where some eyewitnesses claimed to have seen the boy. They came up with nothing. Then, in August, Walter walked into a police station in Illinois, stated who he was, and was quickly brought back to Los Angeles. Here's where the mystery really begins. Christine Collins knew immediately that the boy was not her son. Being the 1920s, the captain of the LAPD simply told Christine Collins that the boy was of course her son, and that he only looked different because he had matured a bit. As a mother who was being told this boy was her son, Christine was obviously being hysterical. The LAPD captain, one J.J. Jones, even told Christine to take the boy home and just try him out for a couple of weeks. Imagine hearing that today. Things kept getting crazy. Christine gathered her son's dental records along with groups of her friends who knew the real Walter personally. J.J. Jones wasn't having any of it. Instead of listening to the evidence, he claimed Christine didn't want to take care of her kid and was trying to get rid of him. He even had her committed to the psychiatric ward at the Los Angeles County General Hospital. While Christine was in the hospital, her story turned out to be true. The imposter eventually admitted that his real name was Arthur Hutchins Jr., a boy from Iowa who ran away and tried to take Walter Collins' place because the two looked somewhat similar. Still, it wasn't until 10 days after Arthur's confession that Christine was finally released from the psychiatric ward. She later received $10,800 in court on the account of her being falsely imprisoned and all. To this day, nobody knows what happened to the real Walter Collins. Number 7. Paula Jean Weldon. The last words ever spoken by Paula Jean Weldon were, I'm gonna hike on the long trail. Paula was 18 years old, just a sophomore at college up in Bennington, Vermont. It was December of 1946, and about 2:45 p.m., she decided to go hiking on the long trail. That was over 60 years ago, and she still hasn't been found. When Paula was last seen, she was wearing nothing but jeans, lightweight sneakers, and a thin red coat. Eyewitnesses remember that she didn't look dressed properly for the cold winter weather. A man named Lewis Knapp picked up a young girl hitchhiking along Route 67A who matched the description of Paula. He dropped her off near Long Trail, where she was subsequently witnessed at least 45 minutes later in the area of Brickford Hollow, where residents saw her heading towards the trail. One man even recalled warning Paula that it was dangerous to head up into the mountains dressed in such a way, and at such a late hour. But she went anyway into the dimness of the woods and never was seen again. Nobody knows what happened to Paula. Her body was never found, she was never spotted again, and her unusual behavior on the day of her disappearance has yet to be solved. She clearly knew that going into the mountains not prepared for the cold was a bad idea. What was she thinking? And more importantly, did she make herself disappear on purpose? Number 6, the Bridge of Horror. In Scotland, there's a mysterious bridge that has been luring animals to their deaths. According to those who have lost their pets at this very bridge, something simply comes over them when they get too close to it. Hundreds of Scots have claimed that their dogs become possessed by an indescribable energy at the bridge, then try their hardest to throw themselves off the stones, where many of them ended up dead in the valley below. It has been going on since the 1950s, though the bridge itself, called the Overton Bridge, was built at least a century prior. The bridge is located in Dumbarton, and depending on who you ask, it's haunted by a malevolent force straight out of the Twilight Zone. Here's where the mystery gets really spooky. The bridge is in a location described by the pagan Celts as Thin Place. A thin place is supposedly where heaven and earth overlap, creating a kind of paranormal zone. This is what the superstitious residents of Dumbarton say is responsible for all the doggy deaths. According to the New York Times, anywhere between 50 and 600 dogs have died by flinging themselves off this mysterious bridge, supposedly compelled by an unseen and possibly evil force. Number 5, the Georgia Guidestones. It was June of 1979. A man under the false name of R.C. Christian approached the Elberton Granite Finishing Company about building him a monument. He was to remain anonymous throughout the entire process, and so too was the group he represented. He had all kinds of money to fund the project, he was able to complete all the legal contracts seamlessly, and all information about him and how the project was even accepted by local government and put forward was withheld from the public. A year later, the Georgia Guidestones were finished. They were placed in a seemingly obscure part of Georgia with absolutely no significance, erect on a hill for all to see. The stones are engraved with 10 guidelines, rules which seem to have been made up to be implemented after an apocalypse. They are written in English, Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, Russian, and others. One of the most bizarre guidelines is that humanity is to remain under 500 million, meaning the total population of humans on Earth should not surpass that number. To this day, nobody knows who built the Georgia Guidestones or what their true purpose is. They could have been constructed by Satanists, those working with the New World Order, or an organization so secretive we don't even know about them yet. Regardless, I kinda wanna go see them myself. Don't you? Why or why not? Let me know in the comments below, then remember to subscribe to Talltanic if you haven't already for more weird videos. Number 4, Kiera Coles. The last time Kiera Coles was seen, it was October 2nd, 2018. At the time, she was 3 months pregnant and 26 years old. She was also employed as a United States postal worker. She vanished on the south side of Chicago, her car out front of her apartment with a packed lunch and a cell phone sitting on one of the seats. Nobody had any clue where she went, why she would have left her phone in her car, or who could have possibly taken her in broad daylight in front of her own home. The most tragic part about this case is that police haven't been a very big help. Kiera's own mother believes that her boyfriend may have had something to do with it, as Kiera had been dating the father of her unborn baby for 6 years, and after her disappearance, he vanished. Kiera's mother suspects he could have something to do with the case, but the police won't make any comments about it. In 2020, the case was considered inactive. But by 2021, NBC Chicago reported the case changed to being an ongoing investigation with foul play suspected. Number 3. The Big Gray Man. In 1925, hiker, professor, and a member of the Royal Geographical Society gave an account of a mysterious incident that occurred on the summit of Ben Macdui, Scotland, several decades earlier in 1891. He claimed that as he was returning from the summit, he heard something else walking behind him. He never physically saw anyone through the mist, but did say that he would never go back to Ben Macdui ever again. There were other reports of similar things happening in the area around the same time, with hikers claiming that they heard slow footsteps as if being followed. Nobody ever actually saw something until the 1940s. It was during the 40s that hikers began to come forward, saying that they'd witnessed a large figure in the mist with long, dark hair. The creature came to be known as the Big Gray Man. Nobody knows if the Big Gray Man really exists. Nonetheless, dozens of hikers, both locals and internationals, have heard footsteps while climbing Ben Macdui and experienced a sense of being followed, along with a terrible foreboding. But there has never been a plausible explanation put forward, nor has there been any evidence of a creature living on the mountain. To this day, nobody knows why people hear these noises or what it is they truly see out in the fog. Number 2. Moira Elizalde. Moira Elizalde vanished on the day before Thanksgiving in 2015 in Dallas, Texas. It had been a festive time, with Maria's mother preparing Thanksgiving dinner for the whole family. But Maria and her sisters began to get bored. They wanted to go outside and play with the neighbors. They left their house at about 7:30 p.m., they were seen playing in the yard at about 9, and when they were called to come back into the house, only 2 of them returned. Maria vanished from the front yard without a trace. As you can imagine, Maria's mother was panicked. She called for her daughter, she checked with the neighbors, and even managed to get surveillance footage from cameras on the street. But nobody knew where Maria went. Train stations were checked, police were called, an investigation ensued, and not a single lead has come about since. Even 6 years later, nobody has seen Maria. The girl was only 15 years old. Police were initially wondering if perhaps the child had run away, but if she had, you think she would have at least given her mother a call sometime during the last 6 years. After all, kids usually only run away for a couple of weeks at a time, maximum. Her sisters never saw anyone suspicious, and to be quite frank, there really is no explanation. One second she was standing in her front yard, and the next, she was a ghost. Number 1. Boston Heist Painting. It was March 18, 1990, when 13 works of art valued at around $500 million were stolen from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. It's one of the greatest art thefts in history, and famous because nobody has ever been caught for the crime. In the morning, guards admitted 2 men pretending to be police officers responding to a 911 call. They were actually thieves who quickly tied up the guards and then looted the museum over the next 60 minutes. They stole paintings, a couple of artifacts, and the Storm on the Sea of Galilee, one of the most famous and valuable Rembrandt paintings ever. 13 works of art in all were stolen, and not a single person has been held responsible. So far as the FBI is concerned, the robbery was likely planned by a criminal organization. The only problem is that they don't know which organization was involved. There was no physical evidence, interrogations turned up nothing, undercover informants were given no information, and all sting operations failed. To this day, nobody knows who robbed all these paintings or where the paintings are now. Sound off on your theories about these unsolved mysteries in the comments. Thanks for watching the video, and don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content.